Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real, where we talk about things that matter with people who matter. And today I'm working from my home office. It is a snowy day here in Fargo, and there's something about soft snow that makes me really contemplative and has me do some pondering and wondering. I went out and shoveled the first round this morning, and now I'm just in this space of wondering and pondering. And I've had two really significant conversations this week with friends who like to dig in, like I do, to some of these deeper conversations. And the two people, I won't name their names just because I haven't gotten their permission to share this, because this is my perspective of those conversations. But one was about religion and one was about politics. And if you're like me, you've been taught or conditioned or trained that we shouldn't talk about those things. And when we don't talk about those things that are really important and significant and can be challenging, then we have no opportunity to build discernment muscles that would help us get better at having conversations about subjects that are difficult. And where I live, in the part of the country that I live, we tend to be pretty conflict avoidant. We don't like to have conversations that might challenge our thinking or give us different perspectives than the ones we've already decided are our points of view. And I could be wrong about that. I could be really generalizing something that doesn't apply to everybody, and I think that's true because it doesn't apply to me. Yet I have experienced more often than not that is our way of being around here. So as I've been really wondering and pondering about religion and politics, I have done a little bit more digging into some of the books that I've read, and in one case, the friend I talked to the other day about politics gave me some of his wonderings and ponderings about this too. So I wanted to share some of that with you, and it may be a little deeper than you are comfortable going. And so if you don't, like, I just saw a viewer leave when I said that. I can tell who's viewing this live. It's kind of funny. I say this might be kind of deep, and then the viewer goes away, which is completely fine. If you feel that you want to participate, as we do with the Facebook Lives, please put comments here and I will address them. So the first topic that I'd like to do a little conversation, dialoguing about is religion. So I was raised, thankfully I was raised in a Christian home where I had some foundational, fundamental beliefs that are not in themselves bad at all. And yet the way I was raised was very dualistic, very black and white, very right and wrong, true and false, up and down, very much one way. It is this way and that is it. There is no room for dialogue, no room for questioning. In fact, I remember in Sunday school when I was really young, really young, I don't know, elementary school, one of my Sunday school teachers said, "Here's the deal. If you have to," she didn't say here's the deal, but if you question, then you don't have faith. So you have to remember that there are things you won't understand, and you don't question some of these things. And I remember early thinking something's wrong with me because I have questions and I want to know more. I don't think I was trying to challenge my Sunday school teacher. I think I was just wanting more information, wanting to go deeper. I learned about the pygmies in Africa who didn't know Jesus, and then my grandma told me it was my job to make sure that everybody knew about Jesus. And I felt so overwhelmed as a, 3 and 4 year old. So religion's always been really heavy for me. And this friend I had the conversation with this week had a similar upbringing to me. Dave, you brought up Shakespeare now, so go for it. Okay, I will. Shakespeare, nothing is good or bad. It's just our thinking that makes it so. Is a Shakespeare quote or thought. So I'm going to jump in. Thank you, David. I'm just going to. And one, I guess, source that I found very helpful when I started to question religion was Conversations with God. And I'll never forget who told me about it. It was my friend Troy. And Troy, back in, oh man, I don't even remember when, a long time ago, told me about this Neale Donald Walsch book, Conversations with God. And I have become a huge fan of Neale Donald Walsch's work since. So I had this original book with a lot of underlining and highlighting. If you're watching the video, you can see that I highlight my books a lot. And then I had the opportunity to actually meet Neale Donald Walsch. And so I got another book which has no writing in it, but this is the only writing that's in it. And I am a fan of autographed books. So if you can't see this or you're listening to the podcast, it is Neale Donald Walsch's signature on my book. It says Jodee, exclamation point, love, Neale Donald Walsch. And so I really treasure this book. And I won't go into the detail about how Neale had his experience. That's for you to discover as you read it if you want to. But there are a couple of things early in this book. Since Neale felt he was having a conversation with God and he was writing it down on legal pads, and he would ask his question and then write what he got from who he called God in this conversation he was having. And so I just want to share a little bit. One of the questions was, to whom does God communicate? Are there special people? Are there special times? The way I was raised, there are special people, and there are probably special times. If you believe in God and Jesus and follow the doctrines of the church you were raised in, you may, I don't think we'd ever say you may get a divine revelation from God, um, because that happened in the Bible. That was done back in the Old Testament, I think, was the way I understood it. But in this conversation Neale Donald Walsch is having, he asks that question: to whom does God communicate? Are there special people? Are there special times? And the response he got in his writing was, all people are special and all moments are golden. There is no person and there is no time one more special than another. Many people choose to believe that God communicates in special ways and only with special people. This removes the mass of the people from responsibility for hearing my message, much less receiving it, which is another matter. Good stuff. And allows them to take someone else's word for everything. You don't have to listen to me, for you've already decided that others have heard from me on every subject, and you have them to listen to. And I highlighted this part. By listening to what other people think they heard me say, you don't have to think at all. And that was kind of my experience. You don't have to think at all. This is the biggest reason for most people turning from my messages on a personal level. This is God talking here. If you acknowledge that you are receiving my messages directly, then you are responsible for interpreting them. It is far safer and much easier to accept the interpretation of others, even others who have lived 2,000 years ago, than seek to interpret the message you may very well be receiving in this moment now. And I can't say that I feel I've received messages from God or I don't know that. Yet there is something inside of me that is a real knowingness where my head, my heart, and my gut feel this is just right for me. Right for me. Not I need to preach it to everyone and everyone needs to believe what I believe. It's so distinct from that for me. And while I might call it God, I might say, I might say I would follow Jesus as a teacher. I, I don't know that everyone in the whole wide universe needs to believe exactly the way I believe. Because if they do, then I become the responsibility for everybody's interpretation of things, as that passage just said. And that doesn't leave any room for people to discern for themselves. And so this concept of truth with a capital T or a small t, I suppose it could be, is really fascinating to me and really frustrating for people I've been having conversations with. Not all of them, but some people. Because if there's absolute truth with a capital T, then there's no room for dialogue. There's no way to ask any questions about it. There's no need for clarification because it just is what it is. And that, to me, is really limiting. And it doesn't require any discernment on my part. I think I titled this today Expectations. And it's funny because if you have expectations about something, then you are really tied to your outcome. I wrote my first book in 2006, and I remember one of the chapters had a quote at the beginning of it. In fact, I think one of the chapters was about expectation. And the quote was, "Blessed are they who expect nothing, for they shall not be disappointed." And in a way, that's a little jarring to think about that quote because, well, gee, then don't expect anything. But it kind of goes deeper when I think, why should I put my expectations on other people? Blessed are they who expect nothing, for they shall not be disappointed. And then on the other hand, I expect that people will be good. I expect that you'll do the right thing. And so it's just really uh, something I struggle with. David says, "You speak of the classic Reformation divide. Who is the authority?" Oh, what a great question. Who is the authority? And if I believe there is a creator and there is someone who created me in that person, that entity's image and likeness, then I call it God. So to me, that's the authority that I think of. Yet it's a God who I have a personal relationship with, not necessarily one that was dictated to me. And so it's just a very different concept to think of, David. So I'm not sure of the history or the Reformation divide. I'm not sure of that. Um, I just know how I'm interpreting things, and I'm doing my best to not be an authority on anything. I love dialogue where I can suspend previous assumptions in order to learn something so that, to use my favorite book, as you know if you listen to this, to stay above the line, 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, which means that I'm open, curious, and committed to learning. And that learning process, for me, has me share my lived experience in a way that can engage other people, not teach them or mandate to them what is. It's kind of an opportunity for all of us to have shared understandings of things and choose on our own what resonates most with us. And so this whole concept of religion is a really tricky one because the question's great, David, who is the authority? I am working on my faith and my trust, and it's mine, not faith and trust that was mandated to me. So I don't know if I can answer that question other than that. To then jump into the other topic we're not supposed to talk about here, which is politics. I had such a great conversation yesterday with a friend, and he is a deep, deep, deep thinker. And when we get together, we both remember why we love getting together, and then we go, why do we wait so long between our meetings? He was talking to me yesterday about the role of truth in governance related to politics. We were talking about politics in general, and he sent me an essay, I guess, that he has written that he's working on, and he told me I could share it however I wanted to share it. So I really got a lot out of this part of our conversation yesterday. He said, without truth, governance degenerates. I'll back up and give you the paragraph before that. He said, philosophers from Plato to someone whose name I can't pronounce, sorry, Montesquieu, have emphasized truth as the bedrock of any stable society. Plato's Republic posits that justice and truth are intertwined, asserting that a just ruler must possess a philosopher king's pursuit of truth to govern effectively. That's what it was called in his day. Aristotle further argued in Politics that truth and virtue are necessary for rulers to maintain the goodwill of their citizens and the stability of their regime. So how I interpret that is back then, Plato, they kind of had an assumption that truth would be what people would govern with. So without truth, governance degenerates. And so there were three kind of ways that um, citizens or not organizations, cities were governed back then. monarchies, aristocracies, and democracies. And so in monarchies, truth prevents the slide into tyranny by holding rulers accountable. Monarchies. In aristocracies, truth ensures fairness and avoids the selfish rule of oligarchs. And in democracies, truth fosters informed citizenry, curbing the emotional excesses that lead to mob rule. So I'll just go back to what we talked about when we talked about this yesterday. Um, in democracies, truth will allow people, all of us citizens, everybody to have access to the information so that mob rule in the excess won't take over. In monarchies, there's an accountability that happens when we govern with truth. And then in aristocracies, truth ensures fairness and avoids the selfish rule of oligarchs, which is I'm in charge and I deserve. This is how I'm interpreting it. So it's interesting to think about when our country was formed and how the founding fathers wanted to take parts of all three of those. Um, Polybius, in his cyclical theory of governance, which is called anacyclosis, highlights how governments evolve and decay. When monarchy goes bad, it turns into tyranny. When a monarch forsakes truth, they exploit power for personal gain, descending into tyranny. And the historical example was Louis the XVI of France, whose disconnect from the people and failure to address grievances contributed to the rise of tyranny during the French Revolution. I'm thinking again how if we don't learn from history, we're destined to repeat it. And so this friend has really put this together well. Aristocracy gone bad can turn into oligarchy. When elites prioritize self-interest over truth, governance devolves into oligarchy, fostering inequality and resentment. Here's the historical example. The late Roman Republic, where the Senate's corruption alienated the populace, leading to the rise of Julius Caesar and the eventual establishment of imperial rule. So again, learn from history or destined to repeat it. And then democracy, gone bad, turns into mob rule. Democracies collapse into mob rule when truth is replaced by emotional rhetoric or misinformation. Historical example. The Athenian democracy's downfall after succumbing to populist demagoguery as seen in the trial and execution of Socrates. So I love thinking about Socratic dialogue because that's what Socrates did. It was all about having conversations, and it wasn't about teaching by his own um, wisdom alone. It was so different. And so then, to go forward in this essay, the U.S. governance model. So the framers of the U.S. Constitution, influenced by Montesquieu and Polybius, designed a mixed government to incorporate strengths of monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy, all three. Monarchy is the executive branch. The president embodies the central authority of monarchy but is constrained by checks and balances. Example: George Washington's presidency exemplified a leader grounded in truth and restraint, setting a precedent for accountability. Aristocracy, then, is the Senate and the judiciary. The Senate, with longer terms, and the judiciary were designed to act as stabilizing forces insulated from populist pressures. Example: the Senate's deliberative role in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 reflects this aristocratic function. And then democracy, the House of Representatives. The House represents the people directly, reflecting democratic principles. Example: the populist energy of the New Deal programs driven by House legislation showcases this democratic dynamic. So I could keep going. He gives a lot more here, which is really awesome to think about. But this is a wonder and ponder that I wish more people would engage in instead of saying this is what is right. My truth is the truth. Go back to religion. It's kind of the same thing. If everybody is supposed to believe the exact same way in everything, we become robots. We become non-thinkers. And then only the aristocracy or only the people who are the richest in the world or whoever, that's where we find ourselves now, kind of people who have the money make the rules. And that's how the golden rule has kind of devolved, because the golden rule used to say do unto others as you would have done unto you. And it seems these days it's turned into those who have the gold make the rules. And I wonder what, this is why I wonder and ponder, I wonder and ponder what could be an alternative way of seeing both religion and politics if we had the wherewithal to have conversations that matter with people who matter. And I know for some of us, me included, sometimes this is just way over my head. This is too much. I don't want to think about this. I'm just going to go back to doing things the way I've always done them. No harm, no foul. All good. Yet, if there is digging our heads in the sand and trying to escape conversations that matter, and then popping our heads up when those conversations blow by, I think we're getting ourselves into a stuck place. And that's the story that opens my new book, Just Give a Shit, Dare to Care, Get Real, and Transform Your World, uh, by my boss when I was early in my career. And he told me that's what we North Dakotans tend to do, stick our heads in the sand when new ideas come from wherever they come. And then we pop our heads up when they blow by and go, phew, made it past that one. And if we choose to be that, I have no problem with people who choose to be that. Just please do not try to make me believe that too. I really wish there were an opportunity to have these kinds of conversations. And David, thank you for being here and for bringing up some really great questions, because that's the kind of questions that we will take with us. And then we focus more on the questions than on the answers. And typically we want answers. We want answers fast. Give me the right answer. Tell me what to do. Don't make me think about it. And if we don't focus on better questions, we can't possibly get better solutions or more possibilities, because the question is where the transformation happens, not in the answers. If we can hold on to the questions and just ponder a lot of things and determine for ourselves what works and what might not work instead of what's right and what's wrong. That's what one of the things I've learned from Neale Donald Walsch, Conversations with God. So I will leave it at that. That's a 20-minute conversation that will allow you to just kind of sit with that, ponder it for yourself. And if you're interested in having any of these conversations with others who are in this same kind of pondering mode, that's what we do in the Enlightened Leadership Lab on Mondays. I'm also creating something called Purple Dialogue, which will have some of these topics as well. Purple Dialogue started out of a political conversation where red and blue make purple when they're combined. But I think it can go beyond only politics and have a lot of conversations about things that seem to be opposite, but really probably have a lot more in common than we might anticipate. David, it says it's a matter of where you place your credences. Yes, it is. And what's important? What's important to me? What is important to you? And if we have that understanding, I don't have to necessarily agree, like, oh yeah, that's mine too. But if I know yours and you know mine and we respect each other, we don't have to be threatened by someone who thinks differently than we do. We can actually have a conversation from two different perspectives that enlightens both of us. And I think together, if we don't see things as only either or, black, white, one or the other, we can actually expand into grayscale, but beyond that to technicolor. And I don't know about you, listeners, but I would prefer to live my life in technicolor and have all of the opportunities and everything to be considered. Just because, I always say this, but just because I don't like peanut butter doesn't mean everybody needs to hate peanut butter. I mean, what kind of world would that be? Karen says, one thing that is starting to occur to me is the constant bashing of wealth or wealthy people. I do agree somewhat that it's turning into those with the gold make the rules, but our representative democracy is in control of the people we send to make the rules. I agree the government is so far removed from most of the public. I don't know what the answer is, but bashing the wealthy doesn't work. There are a lot of morally corrupt poor people and middle class as well. Such a great thing to consider, Karen. Thank you for that. And sometimes we think follow the money, and follow the money is where everything gets lost, because those people with money can buy their way into things. And I've heard that perspective too. So I think you're right to tell us, Karen, to remember it's not only bashing of wealthy people. In some cases, in many cases, wealthy people have done a lot of work to acquire wealth, and they're doing such great things with their wealth. And I think I've heard it said, Karen, that the people who talk the most about money are those who don't have it, and many times it's to bash those who do. So I think that is a really great point to be made. And so in that dialogue, could we have a conversation about what are wealthy people doing with their wealth, and is there a way that instead of looking at um, the people who do need support and help in ways that they don't have wealth to give that to them, is there a way to have those conversations in a way that brings us together rather than that separates us? And I believe there is. Like you said, I don't know what the answer is, Karen said, but bashing each other is not a way to get any of us a solution. It's only to make one side right, I guess. You know, that goes back to below the line. In unconscious leadership, it's closed, defensive, and committed to being right. And if we are committed to being right about what we already believe, then we have no space for learning. And I don't know about you, but learning for me is going to be a lifelong pursuit. And again, maybe I'm saying that which says you should think the way I do. I don't mean it to be like that. I just know that there are going to be a certain um, segment of the population who wants to dig in that way, and it won't be everybody, and that's okay. Yet when I find my people, and when we find our people, and when we feel seen and heard and gotten and appreciated and respected, that's where I think dialogue can happen. Karen says lots of learning opportunities for sure. And I believe it takes open-mindedness, Karen, to get to the point where we actually want to have a dialogue, where we can suspend our previous assumptions in order to learn. And that's what I love about true dialogue and these conversations I've had this week. So take what you will from this, take what occurs as valuable for you, and leave the rest. No need to bash me, no need to bash anybody who's here. I love the word bash. That's a great word, Karen, because sometimes feels like that. We're bashing each other. What's the point of that? It's like burning down the house. Why? I mean, fighting fire with fire burns everything down. That doesn't make any sense to me. Might there be another way? I don't always know what the other way is, but I believe there's another way. And if we care enough about our humanity, and we can go back to what my friend talked about with the American democracy, or the way that we developed our republic, I guess, was to take those three um, ways of seeing things, the monarchy, the aristocracy, and the democracy, and created a republic that could work for all if we understood truth in a different way, perhaps. So thank you for being here. Thank you for hanging in there. And I look forward to speaking with you again. And by the way, in America, no, not in America, in the world, it is Christmas for those of us who celebrate Christmas, and a lot of other holidays, Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and all things this time of year. Allow us to gather with the people who are important to us and to just kind of be contemplative. And look in Fargo, I can look out at the snow that's falling today and feel a sense of, I could either feel, oh my gosh, now I have to shovel again, or I could look at it and go, this is very peaceful, and um, I'm feeling something that I can actually determine. I don't have to have expectations about something, and to believe that my way is the only way. And so, in that spirit, enjoy, look for the joy, and I believe you will find it, despite any circumstances that would have you experience something different. So thanks everybody for being here, and as always, go get real. Talk to you again.